starting the live stream now, preparing to live stream. I think it will take a few seconds. Good evening and welcome to Women Leaders in Science and Social Innovation in the time of COVID-19. I'm Gabriela Ivan, the International Partnerships Manager of PRD First Tech Challenge Romania and Natie Prin Educatie NGO. And it is my pleasure to be your moderator for this today's high-level panel organized with the support of the Falling Walls Foundation and our event partners, the US Embassy in Romania, Berlin Science Week, and International Science Council. I am honored to be joined by our esteemed panelists, world-renowned women leaders from science and social innovation fields, addressing in our international event the current COVID-19 challenges and ways to empower communities through their initiatives. My pleasure to greet and welcome to our session our esteemed panelist, Her Excellency Simona Miculescu, Ambassador Permanent Delegate of Romania to UNESCO, who is joining us through a video remark. Ms. Staci Rijal, the Foreign Affairs Officer, Office of Science and Technology Cooperation, U.S. Department of State. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Dr. Alexandra-Maria Bocse, State Advisor, Department of Climate and Sustainability at Presidential Administration of Romania. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you. Dr. Olivia Todaran, International Relations Scholar, Romanian diplomat. Welcome.
Good evening to everyone and glad to be in such a wonderful panel.
Thank you. Ms. Alison Meston, the Director of Communication for the International Science Council. Welcome.
Thank you, Gabriela, and I'm delighted to be here and looking forward to some interesting discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Judith Bodenstein, the Program Manager for Berlin Science Week. Welcome.
Hey everyone, it's great to be here. I'm looking forward to the panel.
I welcome also our audience joining us from all over the world on our YouTube live stream, and my special welcome to the high school student robotics teams from our program, PRD First Tech Challenge Romania, watching us live. I invite our audience to join us in the YouTube chat. We would love to know from where you are joining us today. And also I invite the audience to leave in the chat questions for our esteemed speakers. We will try to get to as many of the questions during our Q&A session after our panel discussion. Without further ado, my pleasure to kickstart our panel discussion by introducing the video remark of Her Excellency Simona Miculescu, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Permanent Delegate of Romania to UNESCO. Ambassador Simona Miculescu has been serving as Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Permanent Delegate of Romania to UNESCO since January 2021, after holding the position of representative of the UN Secretary General and head of the UN office in Belgrade between 2015 and 2020. Prior to this, she was the ambassador, permanent representative of Romania to the United Nations, and during her term in New York, Ambassador Miculescu held several positions, including Vice President of the UNICEF Executive Board, Vice President of the Assembly of State Parties to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, Chair of the Special Political and Decolonization Committee of the General Assembly, Vice President of the UN General Assembly, and Chair of the UN Commission for Social Development. Ambassador Miculescu's 30 years of diplomatic career include the positions of spokesperson for the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, senior media advisor to the minister, director of the press department within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, press secretary of the Romanian Embassy in Washington, D.C., and between 2000 and 2004, she served as foreign policy advisor to the President of Romania with the rank of minister, becoming eventually the first woman in the Romanian diplomatic history to be granted the rank of ambassador. my pleasure to share now Her Excellency Ambassador Miculescu video remark, which I will share with you in just a moment.
Bonjour de Paris. Good afternoon from Paris. What a delight to be with you in this event that gathers women leaders in science and social innovation, an area for which UNESCO has not only a passion, but also a vocation. Thank you, Gabriela Ivan and team, for this joy. This event is very timely because this strange pandemic that has been ravaging our lives has demonstrated once again the crucial role of women, young or not, in science. The women in the research led many key discoveries in the fight against the pandemic, from understanding the virus and controlling its spread to developing diagnosis, tests, vaccines. At the same time, however, there is growing evidence that the pandemic has affected women, including women scientists, more deeply than men, from the perspective of the unbalanced distribution of social, domestic, and family responsibilities. Gender stereotypes and gender inequalities continue to prevent many girls and women around the world from starting and remaining in science careers. Here at UNESCO, we are all aware that we must step up our efforts to close these gender gaps in science and to focus on the norms and stereotypes that limit the careers of young researchers. The priority becomes even more acute when we consider the underrepresentation of women in areas essential for the future, such as the renewable energy or the digital economy, because only 3% of higher education women students choose information technology as their specialty. We need science, and science needs women. It's not just about making a commitment to equal rights. It is also a step towards making science more open, more inclusive, more diverse, and more effective. Women scientists are a source of inspiration to young ladies around the world eager to enter the fascinating world of science. That is why I think it is our duty to support them, to build a more predictable, fair and equal future for them. And from this perspective, let me mention that the UNESCO Science Report will be released this month as it tracks trends and developments in science governance worldwide every 5 years. This forthcoming edition, entitled The Race Against Time for Smarter Development, will have a dual focus on the Sustainable Development Goals and on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It shows, among many other relevant things, that only 33% of the world's researchers are women, despite the fact that they represent 45 and 55% of students at undergraduate and master's levels, respectively, and 44% of those enrolled in PhD programs. UNESCO Director General Audrey Azoulay is a champion of this cause and always reminds that today, in the 21st century, women and girls are marginalized in science-related fields because of their gender. And she also always says that women need to know that they have a place in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and that they have the right to participate in scientific progress. Therefore, starting from the premise that any difficulty must be considered primarily an opportunity, I think it is the right time for you to participate more united and more actively in identifying solutions to all the challenges you and we face. So feel free to explore, to dream, to discover, to innovate. Feel free to feel fearless and to count your blessings. Besides, above all, feel free to act, to take the initiative, to be dynamic, creative, and responsible leaders, not of tomorrow, but of today. Because as computer scientist Alan Kay said, the best way to predict the future is to invent it.
After such a wonderful kickstart of our panel and such an inspirational video from our ambassador Simona Miculescu, which I deeply thank for this powerful inspirational message, I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker joining us live today, Ms. Staci Rijal, the Foreign Affairs Officer, Office of Science and Technology Cooperation from the U.S. Department of State. With a solid education in science and natural resource management and broad experiences across geographies and topics in international policy, Ms. Staci Rijal is a bridge between technical experts and policy makers. Ms. Rijal currently serves as a Foreign Affairs in the State Department Office of Science and Technology Cooperation, where she enhances science, technology, and innovation opportunities for the U.S. government, American businesses, and American academic institutions across Asia. Ms. Rijal serves as the lead of the U.S. delegation to the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Policy Partnership for Science, Technology, and Innovation, and represents the State Department at the Interagency Council for Advancing Meteorological Services, Research and Development Subcommittee. Ms. Rijal is passionate about advancing policies and practices to support diversity, equity, inclusion in STEM in her work and across SDC's programs. Welcome, Ms. Rijal, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Gabriela, for having me today. It is a pleasure to be here with these distinguished panelists. And what an introduction by the ambassador that said a lot of really important and key points. I'll try not to repeat some of those because although some of them definitely do bear repeating, but what I wanted to talk about a little bit today is about how women in STEM are actually really important to foreign policy and to our economies, and a little bit more about what the US State Department does to promote women in STEM. So my office, the Office of Science and Technology Cooperation at the US Department of State, really promotes American science, technology, innovation, and foreign policy equities through global engagement. And there are so many reasons why this is really important to the United States and why we're actually embedded in foreign affairs. We know that working on science internationally means stronger international research partners, which means stronger economies for the US and others to trade with, which means stronger expertise for our scientists and more facilities to access and exchange ideas with. And a huge part of creating strong research partnerships includes ensuring that there are policies and practices in those collaborations, in those programs, in those engagements that support women's participation, women's full participation. You know, the United States has a robust investment in participation of women and girls in science, technology, engineering, and math. And we believe it's critical to addressing things like the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, which we know cannot be solved in a vacuum, and where we need to look for global solutions and global information and share data. But importantly, we also want to advance women's economic participation and really prepare the future workforce to get ready to engage in this technological innovation, the scientific advancement, a lot of the things that the ambassador just referenced in her remarks. And this focus, it goes on at the highest levels of our government. Our Vice President Harris recently stated that the rights of women are democratic rights. She said, the status of women is the status of democracy. And that really has gone to the core of what we do. And there are other actions like a recent executive order, which comes out of the White House, establishing a gender policy council. And as part of this, they actually addressed STEM explicitly. They said that this council has to support gender equity and combat gender stereotypes in education, including promoting participation in STEM. So we at the State Department have taken this to heart. And our Secretary Blinken has taken this to heart. He said, when we tear down barriers that are holding women back, we make economies stronger for everyone. And we know within our office and in the US government that science, technology, and innovation are also a strong backbone to economies. So you have to marry the two together. You have to promote women's participation while also promoting science, technology, and innovation. So for what my office does, because a lot of people don't perhaps understand or haven't experienced it, this means supporting collaborations and policies with international partners so that we know that when we're doing that kind of work, it is both supportive and safe for women to participate. Not only women in other economies and other countries, but also for American women who may be working overseas in different work environments. I like to think about our work falling into three interconnected categories. We like to amplify women in STEM and use our platforms to do that and our engagements to do that. We like to create opportunities for women and girls to participate in STEM. And we also want to address barriers through policy engagements and other things. So I just really briefly on each of those things before I know we'll go into the questions that you have prepared. In terms of amplifying women, again, the ambassador touched on so many key points and why it's really important to have role models and to see women in different positions and in different fields of study. But we also know that we need to have women's voices in the research that's being done, how it's being done, the perspectives being looked at, and we have to correct some of the misconceptions about women's participation in science and in technology and how that may impact their participation. I won't go into it now, but there's a lot of different studies that indicate that when you have a woman participating in a technology business or in a scientific endeavor, that there's a better return on investment, that there is better job creation, and that the science is more robust. And so those are all really good reasons why we need to amplify those opportunities. Another way that we create opportunities for different women in STEM, not only in the United States, but all over the world, is through some of our programs. The one program I'd like to highlight right now is our Global Innovation Through Science and Technology, or GIST program. This program takes science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM entrepreneurs and provides them tools and platforms to grow their business, to amplify, to learn best practices from different businesses around the world. And we've actually done some programs that were women-focused and women-led that really created both networks, but also gave specific training and addressed some of the specific barriers that women have faced. The other thing that we've done to address barriers is to create certain policies and practices, such as there's something within the Asia-Pacific context, which I know is a little bit outside of our area, where we created something called the APEC Women in STEM Principles and Actions. APEC is the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. We brought together private sector, academic, government, and civil society actors to develop a list of kind of truths about women's value to the STEM enterprise and to the barriers that they face, and a list of potential actions to help address those. And our whole goal is to create a community of practice. But to bring it back to one of our most pressing and current challenges is COVID. I mean, we know that many global challenges disproportionately impact women, and there's research emerging, and I think, again, the ambassador referenced this, that we're also seeing this in COVID. Not only are there disproportionate health disparities that are occurring, but actually, women in STEM are experiencing this in terms of their career opportunities and their abilities to get grants and their abilities to get tenure and their abilities to do their lab work. Those studies are just coming out, but we know that women are taking on a majority of the care work that they are, caring for others, caring for themselves, caring for family members. We also know that a lot of our frontline workers are women. And, they are engaged in some of these STEM fields, and that, they're having to go and, be pivoting to address this current pandemic, and how does that impact them long term? And so we have to think about these, and we have to think about our international science collaboration in the coming years to address what we're learning about the impacts in this current COVID pandemic, to raise awareness of the impact, to address it through policies and practice, and to come up with global solutions to prevent these kind of impacts and any stalling for women in STEM and the STEM pipeline to occur. I know that was a lot on what we do and on women in STEM, and I know you have some additional questions, but I hope that was a helpful overview of the perspectives of the United States, how we engage in foreign policy, women in STEM, and the impact of COVID-19 on women in STEM.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. And STEM, science, technology is a field so close to my heart as well, regarding the BETA, the First Tech Challenge Romania Robotics and STEM Education Program, which is US based. And we have here a lot of high school students, almost 3,000, who are building robots, who are working in teams and applying science. So I know the programs that you shared and your perspective is going to be, especially for them, very, very insightful. What is your perspective on the role of scientific cooperation? You mentioned the cooperation with different policy partners. So what is your perspective on the role of scientific cooperation between state, private, and civil society actors during COVID-19 and in a post-pandemic world?
Well, first, I think it's absolutely critical. And I would have said that even before COVID. I don't think that the value and importance of different actors in the scientific sphere working together is unique to COVID, because we face and have faced global challenges for a long time, but just in general, science collaboration helps us do better science. I mean, a cornerstone of science is testing out hypotheses and collecting data and sharing insights and sharing different perspectives. And the more that you can work with different partners who bring different resources, different perspectives, different data to the table, the more robust your science is likely to be. So I think that during times of the pandemic, it's absolutely, necessary. You just can't respond in a timely manner without that, especially when it's something impacting the globe. But again, I can't think of a single global challenge where this isn't helpful, a helpful perspective and a helpful way of working to move things forward.
And talking about moving things forward, as we move to the new normal, and we rely on this cross-sector collaboration and multiple actors who are fostering innovation, addressing all of our global challenges. How do you see women leadership playing a key role?
Well, again, I think that not just in a post-COVID world, but in a pre-COVID world, we needed more women's voices in the science and the technology and the engineering that we were doing. We know that there are different perspectives that women bring to the table when it comes to leading businesses, when it comes to developing research problems and identifying solutions. We have concrete data, again, that I referenced earlier, that when women are involved in these endeavors, there's, especially in the technology sphere, there's a better return on investment. There's more job creation, there's more other things. And I think we could do a better job of amplifying that because I think that's misunderstood. I think that women can also continue to advocate for addressing barriers within their institutions, but also we have to get others who don't identify as women to say that these things are important, that there is value, and to amplify, again, those barriers and opportunities that there are for women's engagement. In terms of other concrete steps we could take, one of the things I do want to raise is the collection of data. So I mentioned that we know, and there's research beginning to come out. I believe UNESCO is even doing some of this research on the impacts of COVID-19 on women researchers. And I think that that is something that we need to look into in a data-informed way. I mean, we can tell you anecdotally, I can tell you how many times my kids have come in, and researchers can tell you about how they have lost time in the lab or how they've missed out on grants because of these things. But really, when it comes down to it, having data that is collected, that's peer reviewed, that's robust, that is shared, is something that can help us all to address these concerns and to address these barriers so that we can prevent them from happening in the future.
Thank you so much for this inspirational input regarding women leadership and the role that science will play in addressing all of our global challenges, but also opportunities. So thank you so much. My pleasure to introduce our next esteemed speaker, Dr. Alexandra-Maria Boxer, State Advisor, Department of Climate and Sustainability at the Presidential Administration of Romania. Dr. Alexandra-Maria Boxer completed a PhD in Politics and International Studies at University of Cambridge, a master's degree in International Relations at the same institution, Cambridge. Previously, she graduated from her Bachelor in Political Science at the University of Bucharest, Department of Political Science, as a valedictorian. In 2016, Dr. Boxer joined the Department of International Relations at London School of Economics, and she continued there her research and teaching on European and international energy, environmental, and climate affairs. In 2015-16, she was a fellow at the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs, Harvard University, through a Fulbright Schumann Award. Here she worked especially on transatlantic energy and environmental relations. Previously, she was a doctoral researcher and coordinator of the European Center at the Department of Politics and International Studies, University of Cambridge. Overall, Dr. Boxer has over 7 years of experience teaching at both undergraduate and graduate levels, European politics, global energy and environmental politics, international affairs at University of Cambridge, London School of Economics, and King's College London. Since 2011, she also worked in analysis and advisory roles or provided advice to the European Union, governments of EU member states, and intergovernmental organizations in recent years, particularly on energy and environmental politics and economics. And she was appointed state advisor in September 2020. Welcome, Dr. Alexandra-Maria Boxer, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gabriela, for the introduction. And let me reiterate that I'm very honored to accept your invitation and be part of this panel. A panel that actually is pushing forward societies through scientific and social innovation. In my intervention, I will focus in particular on the innovation and changes needed for a post-COVID sustainable world. In line with my current role at the Romanian Presidential Administration. And I want to highlight that the President of Romania and the Romanian Presidential Administration is committed to supporting such a sustainable world through different pledges that we have taken. And we are supporting advancements in the field of climate and sustainability in Romania by trying to contribute to strengthening Romania's role at international level in climate and sustainability policy, increasing Romania's access to green finance, promoting climate and environmental education, increasing the level of ambition in afforestation and forest protection in Romania, as well as supporting the energy transition and policies that are enabling clean transportation. Now, unfortunately, we all know that the COVID-19 pandemic brought along disease, death, and many limitations on our social and economic life. But I guess the question is there a silver lining? Can something good come out of this pandemic for climate and sustainability? And I'm going to try to argue that, yes, there is such a silver lining. The pandemic did raise awareness on the relation between environmental degradation and disease. We know, and we have studies that are showing that almost all known pandemics, if we are talking about flu, the regular flu, or COVID-19, and about 70% of emerging diseases, the Zika virus, for instance, these diseases actually are caused by microbes of animal origin. Also, we know from the literature, the specialized literature, that pandemics are connected to environmental disturbances. We are talking here about loss of biodiversity, destruction of natural habitats, unsustainable agricultural practices, trade and consumption of wild animals. Also, we have seen during the pandemic that COVID-19 affected, in particular, polluted regions to a higher degree, that air pollution actually enhanced the spread of the disease and also led to more severe forms of the disease in people exposed constantly to pollution. The pandemic also prompted us to rethink life priorities, to prioritize health and family, and gain a new appreciation of family and time spent with our family, as well as to appreciate the outdoor, with many city dwellers actually taking to the parks and forests in the proximity of large urban centers in the context of the pandemic. So the pandemic actually also contributed to prompting us to rethink urban spaces, to think of ways to integrate better parks and green spaces in our urban planning, to reduce the number of cars and traffic congestion, and spend more time shopping and eating out in our neighborhoods, and actually in this way also rediscovering these neighborhoods. Now, when we talk about the recovery post-COVID, this will be a green recovery, and I think that there is consensus at the international level on this. This idea of green recovery post-pandemic is reflected also in the European recovery plans, and also the Romanian recovery and resilience plan has a substantial allocation to reforms and actions that are related to climate and the environment, in recognition of the fact that we need to talk about a green recovery. Now, this process of recovery also needs to be made as inclusive as possible, and also it needs to make the most of the financial resources available, because of course the financial resources that we have are not unlimited. And I think in making the most of those financial resources, it is in this particular area where we need to show great ability for social innovation. I will leave it at that, and I look forward to your questions and to the rest of the discussion.
Thank you. And I would love to hear your perspective on the most pressing challenges during COVID-19, regarding especially the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, especially SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, and SDG 13, Climate Action.
I think one of the challenges over the last year was to make sure that we stay focused and we treat climate change and sustainability challenges with priority. And I mean, we have seen actually during the lockdowns that there has been a drop in the greenhouse gas emissions, but as social and economic life resumes, those greenhouse gas emissions high levels are back. Unfortunately, We also have seen the postponement of major multilateral events. Certain high-level meetings have been pushed for 2021 and probably also for future years. And when I talk about the postponement of major multilateral events, I have in mind in particular the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change that was supposed to take place in Glasgow and was pushed from 2020 to 2021. And of course, this event is very important in pushing forward the climate regime and coming with coordinated global decisions and plans to address climate change. Also, we need to be aware of the economic contraction and the budgetary cuts that we have seen in several countries. And there has been a worry over the last year that they might limit the investment that the public sector is willing to make in sustainable goods and services. For instance, in moving forward in the field of public green procurement. But the COVID-19 pandemic also showed us that international cooperation is important, that cooperation between the public and private actors is important in coming up with solutions, solutions to stop the pandemic, for instance, as it was the case with the vaccine. And I believe such cooperation is also key in fighting climate change. But what I want to highlight is that when it comes to climate change, it is less likely that we will find a silver bullet solution. So something similar to the vaccine way out. To address climate change, we need to put forward packages of measures and act in several fields. And I'm talking here about the economy, transportation, energy, agriculture, and also to make sure that our action in these domains is quite well coordinated.
As we were mentioning earlier, it's such a hot topic, the expression of new normal. How do you see the new normal as we are adapting to it during COVID-19 and beyond in terms of climate and sustainability? And as we were mentioning earlier with Miss Staci Rijal, how can state, private civil society actors play a role in protecting the environment and contributing together to a more sustainable society model?
Mm-hmm. Definitely, the concept of new normal is something that we come across quite often. And I actually think that there are a few areas in which change brought about by the pandemic is irreversible. And I'm talking about change that will define and already is defining our daily new normal, change that has implications for the field of climate and sustainability. What we are seeing is that people are working and studying from home more often. And this trend will most likely persist also after the pandemic. People might decide to work from home a few days a week. This will reduce actually their commute time and also the emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions generated in the commute process. Also, we see an increasing community interest in having access to quality private and public outdoor space, and a tendency to prioritize the urban green space in particular. I mean, in Romania, based on some studies, we have seen quite a lot of interest among municipalities to set up urban natural parks. And I want to highlight and remind those of you that are familiar with the Romanian context that actually the concept of urban natural park is not that well known in Romania. So it's great to actually see a lot of interest in embracing this type of green space. Also, another trend and a tendency that I believe will persist after the pandemic is the growing digitalization of commerce and home delivery services. And I guess here it's quite important in order for this trend to have a positive impact when it comes to sustainability, to make sure that we achieve high levels of sustainability when it comes to packaging. So there is a need to innovate further and to make sure that home delivery services and this new trend doesn't leave us with a lot of packaging that we don't recycle, or we cannot recycle, or packaging that is contributing to the amount of waste that we generate. Now, clearly, governments need to work with the private and civil society actors. Civil society can contribute knowledge, information to governments. Also, they can share from their experience. And environmental NGOs have a strong record in Romania in piloting projects that can be then extended at the national level with the help of governments. The Romanian presidential administration works with NGOs on many issues, on afforestation, on urban natural parks, as well as on education. When it comes to businesses, of course, they are very important. As they can embrace more sustainable practices in their operation, they can reduce waste in their operations, and also they can financially support climate and environmental education programs in schools and in communities. And of course, the banking sector is also very important in financing green projects. So we need to engage in a dialogue with business and also banking actors. Now, in the next years, we need to build coalitions of the willing and of the able, coalitions that bring together governmental, civil society, and business actors. And we do have, the Romanian presidential administration has worked towards building such coalitions, and we are hoping to achieve solid coalitions in different fields, such as, for instance, education for climate and the environment, afforestation, and also in the field of the decarbonization of the economy.
Thank you so much for sharing with us your outlook in terms of climate and sustainability, and to the message of overall collaboration between many actors across civil society, government, and businesses coming together, sharing resources and ideas. Thank you so much. I am pleased to introduce our next esteemed speaker, Dr. Olivia Todaran, International Relations Scholar and Romanian diplomat. Dr. Toderean is a Romanian diplomat, former Director of Policy Planning, currently serving as Director General for Global Affairs in the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She is a scholar with a master's degree at the University of Manchester and a PhD at National School of Political Science and Public Administration. She is the author of or editor of a number of books in international relations and gender studies, and of articles on international relations theories of development, gender in international relations. She has been the translator in Romanian of several books in the same field, some of them pioneering gender studies in Romania. Her latest publications as co-editor include two collections of essays by Romanian and foreign authors on the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic in various fields of national and international public life. We mention here the book in Romanian, Lumea de mâine ce urmează după pandemie, or the post-pandemic world perspectives on foreign and security policy. And she has been awarded 2 public distinctions by decree of the President of Romania in 2007 and 2019 for diplomatic merits. Welcome, Dr. Olivier Todaran, and the floor is yours.
Good evening to everyone. First to our colleagues in the panel, and to Gabriela Ivan as moderator. Thank you really for the opportunity. It has been so interesting, and I think already you could see how the whole picture of what we have to say today is rounding up in a bigger image. I felt, I don't know if the other colleagues have felt the same, the speakers, But whenever we hear these CVs, it's so, it's such a heavy weight on our shoulders to raise up to the expectations of maybe our previous achievements. And let's hope this evening will be at least raised at the level of those CVs that sound so impressive. Now, one point I want to clarify is that unlike perhaps Presidential Counselor Alexandra Boxer, the thing that brought me here to this panel, to my personal joy, is rather my academic and publishing activity. Although I'm logged in, as I see, with the raw MFA because it's the office laptop, I'm here in a more private and scholarly capacity, so to say. And that's how I want to approach things, and also speaking on my own behalf, so to say. Particularly that what I want, the thoughts I want to share with you and our audience tonight are not necessarily tied and not so strictly to foreign policy and geopolitics, but I'll be ready to answer questions to the extent possible on a personal behalf. As you said, Gabriela, it's true that I think the book led you into this invitation, and I want to make a reference on the two books that are related, not being the same yet. I want to make a reference to those because I think on the kind of the global debate, which has been, especially in the first months of lockdown last year, so intense, that idea of the book was quite particular and still stands out as something of a kind. And that's one thing. So I'll say a few words about those, the two books. And also just a kind of a heads up or opening warning that although the CV sounds and reads as it is, I would rather take tonight sort of a not gender-related perspective on our debate with a kind of built-in argument that we can have a very powerful and meaningful debate, even as, taking a wide approach and not necessarily only focusing on the women's role in science. So the six of us as women can have the debate that, sometimes you see only male panels having of the same quality and the same depth in a way, without necessarily taking only the women angle into the topics. So the first thing about the Lumea de Mâine, of the world of tomorrow, what comes next of the pandemic, is that it was an idea of a women, which is mine in this case, but it's really not particularly significant, but it was amazing that having had an idea, which is quite natural for the policy planner I used to be for half a lifetime, I managed to persuade such a wide range of essayists and thinkers and former officials, must say predominantly male, which is a bit still the case in Romania for international relations, foreign policy and security fields, into following that idea and building a book which represents sociologists, psychologists, economists, military people, foreign affairs specialists, and so on, from Romania and from abroad. I think there were about 7 or 8 countries with contributors, into thinking what will come after the pandemic. Although a year ago when we've started, we didn't think it will last in its really kind of peak more than a year. So the book was written only within the lockdown. So from March, April last year, it went to the publisher in May last year. So we were really in the middle of the things and still trying to grasp and to make sense of that. And it was a collective effort of making sense of its 44 authors, I think, in 37 essays in all these disciplines. Unfortunately, but with my very dedicated push, I think there are about 5 or 6 women in this book. And we try to figure out what will come next, how will this change the world, and so on. So the things that are still occupying our evening tonight, or in the case of the US, the morning, depends on which coast and so on. So our time tonight, and I think many of the thoughts there are still valid. Otherwise, I wouldn't have. This is not for making marketing for that book. And we also had the chance to, with the help of some very important former Romanian diplomats, to have an opening, a foreword by Ambassador Wolfgang Ischinger, the CEO of the Munich conference, which of course validated in a way the exercise. And when we saw what a great success it had, and how many common in a way citizens with a lot of different job profiles in Romania were interested, from architects to engineers, as Mrs. Boxer said. This is going to change our way of living, of inhabiting buildings, of traveling, of not only the relationship, so to say, between US, China, and Russia, but everything will be touched by this, which was quite clear at that point already. So we saw a large interest from everyone from very different backgrounds, which kind of encouraged us to continue and focus more on our own fields with some of the co-editors, Educatie and George Scutaru, into focusing in a second volume only in English, with more foreigners contributing on foreign and security policy. And that was a reflection led in September and October. And it's in English. We also have the contribution of our foreign affairs ministers and of a defense minister. But I would make the case that this is still a valid kind of globally exercise into looking the French perspective, Japanese perspective, Spanish perspective, US, and so on, into making sense of that. And because now I can capitalize the 44 authors' thoughts and 37 or whatever the number in the second volume, I really want to share this with you and with people following tonight. Kind of three thoughts from that experience of the book and the echoes it had and the debates on the book that we have attended meanwhile. Although it sounds bad, so a lot of authors everywhere in the world have focused on the roles that this crisis, the pandemic, has. And the majority tilted from some around to this is an accelerator, the accelerator of trends, of previous trends. I heard it so many times that I feel tempted to challenge this. But it's true, it has accelerated many things. For example, digitalization, as Mrs. Boxer already suggested. It has been also a game changer, in particular in international relations, in terms of the global systemic order. Probably we will witness the changing of the system gradually, although not at once. Less people have said that this is a breaker. This has really slowed down things, which is also a pity of some of the consequences. First of all, economic growth and economic developments, but also maybe having social policies more inclusive, or fighting other pandemics, vaccinating children in Africa for other diseases. So there are many roles, and many of the authors in these two projects, but in all others essays across the world, have focused on various roles. Out of everything, which I've been following for really a year and reading thousands, with no exaggeration, of pages, two things stand to my mind, and I think are important to be shared with in the panel tonight. It sounds banal, but it's still almost a practical, everyday message for every one of us, that this crisis has to be seen also as an opportunity. I know it's a PR, it's kind of a 10 tips to survive the pandemic. I don't want to sound like that, but really taking this, a lot of people have went through depression or through very negative state of minds, and organizing their lives and trying to really make sense and grasp, or at least kind of survive this on a day-to-day basis. But we need, every one of us back home, at home with the family or in the office, make this switch that if this was to happen and we couldn't prevent it, which I will not enter the argument, how can we turn this into something positive for our private life? But I'm more interested for our social life, nationally and internationally. So really make this pandemic an accelerator and a game changer, but for the better. So at some point I found many people in my planners community, let's say, but also in our discussions and conversations with citizens, let's make this pandemic really change things and not let kind of the incrementalism or our reflex in being really limited in ambition not make all the changes that could be needed and could be facilitated by that. And I think this thought is, as I said, valid from our private lives and who we are and how can we keep our psychological balance confronted with all this, into how to make kind of visionary and wise and transformative public policies at all levels in all fields. So that would be one very important thought, I think, for us today, and for further reflection with our audience also. And the second one and then I followed it for a year and watched other states, how they do it, and other governments, is the importance of having really dedicated activities for foresight. And this is not only something that private companies should do to stay up on the market and keep their benefits high, let's say, or returns. I think we should follow the example of Finland, not to mention how feminine the government of Finland is, but that could be a coincidence or not. But I know the example of Finland and of Singapore on a different note. They have established foresight in every public institution, central public institutions, and in every ministries, and they run kind of simulations and games with ministers themselves into training us on how to be adaptable, because we are going to live through change for many years now, maybe not of this intensity, but change should not be feared, but should be really grasped and put to use in a way, directly steered in certain direction, but also we need not to reject it, but know how to deal with it. And foresight, more dedicated resources and that kind of train people for foresight across governmental structures, but also in a continuous dialogue with private stakeholders, with NGOs and so on, is crucial. And having, if probably had we had that more strong or stronger in a way, and with more kind of trained experts, we could have maybe not foreseen, but dealt better with the first stages of the pandemic. And colleagues have argued from the volume, have argued including for director of movies who have done movies on the pandemic to be included in such exercises, while keeping in mind that foresight should not be to prepare for the next pandemic necessarily, but to prepare for something next else. So it's not fighting the former war, but preparing in a way, well, just to take a military kind of comparison, for something completely new. So we might be surprised again, and we have to have a built-in adaptability and flexibility in what we do in our mindset. And the last thought I want to share, more of an idea, as the idea of those two projects came as a result of a conference in Bucharest, which was one of the last ones I attended in person before the pandemic, and things were starting in across Asia and coming over. So maybe this idea will be followed on. I kind of generously give it to our audience, and whoever wants to follow up on that. I would have loved to see that project written by women. So to have a team of various specialists from psychology, sociology, economy, IR, security, because there are plenty across the world, into having the same project. How do women see the world after the pandemic, and how would they wish the things to be after the pandemic in all those fields of social life? It would be interesting. For sure, my current responsibilities, which have changed compared to last year, will not allow me to follow up on that. But I would be really happy and interested in reading this approach, which would be by women authors, but focus on global problems, all global problems, the same global problems that take the time now and the preoccupation of all governments and both genders, or all the genders, not to judge necessarily that there are only two. Yes. So those would be my thoughts for us tonight.
In reference to the global problems that you just mentioned, as we are adjusting to this new reality, we cannot help but see the fallout from the coronavirus pandemic, seeing many ripple effects in terms of geopolitical tensions and economic crisis around the world. So what is your viewpoint on all of these global challenges that we are facing?
Thank you for that question, coming more to my turf in a way, to my area of specialization. Now here, maybe just 2 points. One more general that I probably, most adults are still averse to routine, really. Kids are more open and tolerate routine much better. It's even useful sometimes, but adults are really routine adverse, I would say, many of them. So the new normal that it's an aspiration and it's a legitimate aspiration. But first, we are far from that for the moment. For a new normal, things are still in a full dynamic. So of course, the world is never stable. It's never stopping in a fixed place, you know, like the lights of New York never go out. God forbid, unless for a break, for an electrical, accident or a hybrid thing. But the dynamics how is still so intense, the change is so high that getting to a normal is still an aspiration. And how that new normal will be, it's not to be prejudged, because it's in the making. So we still need to be patient and disciplined if it is to make a kind of public appeal for people to still respect restrictions and so on, and look out and try to grasp the trends and the directions and see where we want to take them, because the new normal is far and we are in the midst of making it or of being it made to us, which would be, of course, the worst case scenario, so to say. But that depends on each of our professions and kind of margins of decisions and so on. So in that sense, the new normal should be taken with a bit of more of a salt in a way than just a grain. Now, in terms of the impact on the world and on geopolitics, what we could witness is that now we are getting to the point of geopoliticizing everything. And this is also an analytical maybe temptation, but for sure there are global actors and regional actors, not only global, that are making a political thing and a geopolitical thing out of everything. So the idea of mask diplomacy, to just give one example, or of the geopolitics of vaccines and vaccinations are very real. They mean things and they reflect some trends that are there, let's say, in the global, in international relations now. And one thing we need to do, including as Romania, but as any state and as decision makers in international relations, in my opinion, is to really and fully understand how this plays out and what are the consequences of this on our public policies and on our foreign policy, on our decisions, foreign policy in many subjects, but including foreign policy impact on decisions on how to vaccinate, in what speed, with whom we cooperate, how the EU is approaching the issue of vaccination and so on. So really pledging for more international and European cooperation on the one hand. So accepting this and understanding the geopoliticizing that other actors do, but I would also argue in complementarity that we need to fight that. So we need to not take this as a trend, but try to reverse it or to slow it down and to really make the case, which I'm really happy to say that our leaders do, both in EU, but also globally and multilaterally, that we need not to accept that. And we should not forget the roles that values have, that democracy have, that human rights have, you know, that the value of privacy and all that. So don't take it for granted and not try to reverse that and into the transition from kind of the old world, so to say, to the next stage. Take the values with us and not accept that they are gone and they are undermined and leave them be eroded, you know, let them be eroded. So that would be really something that I would say is really important for, especially for Romania and for like-minded states, for democracies and so on. So, okay, understand it, work with it, but also try to reverse, to balance that and take the values with us, our kind of defining values, including internationally, with us, the UN-based values and Euro-Atlantic values, with us in towards the next stage.
As we are highlighting the important role played by women leaders such as yourself during COVID-19, please share with us your perspective on female leadership and ways we can empower and foster it around the world.
Wow, right. This is really also quite a comprehensive question, but I will again try just to share a few thoughts, which are really very personal. And this is also a personal question, how us as women see the role of women leadership and the type of women leadership across the world. And I would say that first thought is start at home, but in the sense of nationally. Well, including at home, so in the family. But what I want to say is, when trying to push and make the argument and promote global leadership across the world, we need to get our homework done. We need to ensure, and we have a role in making sure that this is done at first level, locally and nationally. And from that point of view, I must say, like, I think with the case of all the countries in the world, there are positives and negatives, or things to catch up in Romania too. I know, because I remember now with Mrs. Bocse's presence here, that, for example, our president is really an image and a vector for the he for she campaign, which is really something to be noted and very important, with the clout and the reputation of his personality and the function. Also, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, if you look across or along our history of Romania, has always been, I must say, it's not just out of a pro domo speech, has always been, or tried at least to be, a vector of modernization for the whole country, so for the society. Of course, diplomats were exposed to other models, to foreign models of society and of modernization, and the ministry has tried to do that. So in terms of figures, of numbers, and including topics, we are quite active into promoting the human rights and girls' inclusion and all these things that kind of give the image of our awareness that gender equality is still a fight, and women equality and women inclusion is still a fight to be fought really importantly across the world. But on the other hand, it must be recognized, or maybe this is really something that as a mother also bothers me a lot, is that I think we should really, it is our role as citizens, not necessarily in our public positions, depending on the positions we hold, to make the case, to make the fight against domestic violence and for kind of combating or finding solutions for girls, women, young women and girls' vulnerability in Romania, a much important public topic on the agenda. Really, it is increasingly so, but for the moment, I don't feel it has all the clout and the energy that it would be needed for having kind of the transition and the inclusive and fairer post-pandemic world that we would like now at home. So I'd say look first for the work to be done at home, if possible, really, and for the awareness that we need to raise, and then the public policies that you need to take to address that fully, really. And then internationally, but in terms you ask for women leadership and how should this be? Now, an encouragement would be, and without, between parentheses, Gabriela Ivan in a way suggested that at the opening that we should have positive messages in our debate, but I think we were all set on that because this was the way we wanted to approach it, and not as a result only of her suggestion. My encouragement for whoever wants to become in her own field a woman leader would be to stay who she is, to be as she is. Really, we are confronted, let's be honest, in all societies with all sorts of criticisms that are either we are too talkative, or we are too aggressive, or that we are too shy, or we are too in many things compared to one prototype, which is not necessarily a kind of a gender infused and I think with the role of so many important women in science, in diplomacy, in leading the countries. Remember the New Zealand model of prime minister. No wonder she is really kind of was before the pandemic one of the important guests in forums like Davos or around the world, is that we can, with our own work and being who we are, I think we can mainstream, so to say, wider or more diverse prototype of what a good leadership can be, with a lot of positive female features in it. Or I won't enter the debate if it's socially constructed or we are inborn with that. We are not in that debate. But the thing is that I think we could really add and enrich the model of leadership across the world. And there are already examples for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Olivier Todaran, and delighted to introduce now our next speaker, Ms. Alison Meston, who is the Director of Communication for the International Science Council. Ms. Meston is originally from Western Australia and joined the International Science Council as Senior Communications Officer in 2019 and was appointed Communications Director in April 2020. Her role includes developing the International Science Council communications and outreach strategy, supporting membership engagement, and working alongside colleagues on a wide range of projects. Ms. Meston holds a Master's of Arts degree in Public Policy and International Law from the American University of Paris, and most recently, a program certificate in Climate Change Management from the University of Edinburgh. Ms. Meston has postgraduate qualifications in journalism and education and considers herself a lifelong learner. Prior to joining the International Science Council, Ms. Meston worked in the communication and information sector at UNESCO as Director of Press Freedom for the World Association of Newspapers and News Publishers, and as a Public Affairs Officer for the British Red Cross. She also spent 12 years in the labor movement in Australia and the UK, organizing campaigns in sectors such as nursing, education, and the food and airline industries. Welcome, Ms. Alison Meston, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Gabriela, and thank you so much. It's, as I said, I'm a lifelong learner, and it's been fantastic to listen to everybody today. I want to say a special hello to the Romanian Academy of Sciences, which was founded in 1866 and who has been a member of the International Science Council since 1931. And I also want to pay tribute today because it's World Health Day. And I want to pay tribute to the frontline workers of the COVID-19 crisis, and also the researchers and scientists that are innovating at great speed to bring us the vaccines and solutions we need to start the end game to the pandemic. And equally the social scientists who are sharing their research on issues such as inequalities around COVID-19 has brought to light, and the new vulnerabilities that have surfaced through job losses and shuttered economies. As well as the devastation the pandemic can bring, I echo Olivia's point that it can also provide opportunities for us. And right now, I believe this is a moment for science. Science is being given an opportunity to provide hope, not just for finding solutions to the pandemic, but for the greater challenges around climate change and biodiversity loss, and ensuring that we build pathways to a zero carbon future and to live within planetary boundaries and to live more equitably. I want to take you back to Thursday, the 12th of March, 2020. After being crammed in the metro on my way to work, I thought this isn't working and it's against the science advice of social distancing. And as a team of office workers at the ISC, we were able to make the decision to work from home, and we cancelled in-person conferences and meetings before government imposed restrictions. And we did this too, as we believed it in our shared responsibility in limiting the spread of COVID-19. And I recognise that not all of us are able to do this when we talk about we're all in this pandemic together. It might be the same ocean, but some of us have different sized boats, and there are still frontline workers working, and not everyone can socially distance. So suddenly overnight, the ISC lost its power to convene expert minds in the traditional way. We lamented this loss of opportunities to exchange ideas, to strategize, to create new partnerships, or consolidate existing ones. And as we know, some of the best ideas and partnerships come during the coffee break at a science conference, or in the lab, or in the field, and this was suddenly lost. But then the International Science Council and community rallied, and I can't think of a time in my memory when every head of state has stood next to the chief science officer or the chief medical officer of their country to address their compatriots on national television about the crisis. So as I said, this is a moment for science, and we want to ensure that we use our convening power to increase global cooperation and decrease nationalism. And for COVID-19, this includes the rollout of vaccines, and for the future, it means living more sustainably and more freely. And we've already spoken about this. This seems to be a theme that's coming up today about collaboration. The Council's vision is to advance science for the global public good, and today I hope we'll do just that as we explore our response to the COVID-19 crisis through scientific collaboration. I'm going to share with you some examples of the projects the Council has worked on and is working on, and some of our key learnings from this time. Through our engagement with members and our affiliated bodies and stakeholders, we set up the COVID-19 Global Science Portal last year. As I share these examples, my colleague Zhenya is going to put these in the YouTube chat for you to explore. So the people who have joined via YouTube, you can click on these links. This portal shared scientific commentary and analysis and provided access to information on various initiatives, highlighting the scale and the scope of the response for international science. What I loved about this portal is it became a focal point for our members and for policymakers to engage with the latest debates and the thinking around the novel coronavirus. And it drove people to engage with the International Science Council and its global membership. An example, we had articles on data science. We had articles on turning the coronavirus molecule into sound. We had hundreds of inputs into the portal, including a study that I think people who are listening to this will find quite interesting from the Global Young Academy about making working from home work for women scientists during the COVID-19 lockdown. It was through these scientific debates and institutional responses from global academies around the world that even more collaborative projects were launched. So projects like the Corona Sustainability Compass, which explored the pandemic as a unique opportunity to rethink current models of business and to shape a new economic start on a more sustainable and future-proof basis. So, we talk about this new normal, but what do we really mean by that? So through this collaboration, we were able to explore this. We also started Global Science TV with the Australian Academy of Science. And what I loved about this project was it aimed to inspire a public audience to get verified information through short form science videos. And you will remember the WHO saying this is an infodemic. We've got all this information and we need to understand what is verified scientific information and what is false information or fake news or misinformation. This is a real challenge for the science community. So during the first wave of the pandemic, the International Network for Government Science Advice, which works under the auspices of the ISC, launched the Global COVID-19 Policymaking Tracker. And it mobilised hundreds of volunteers around the world to log how policy interventions were being made rather than just exploring what policies were being implemented. So we were looking at a process of evidenced policy making. How are governments making these decisions rather than this is the end process, this is the decision they've made. And this creates a whole new bank of knowledge to inform future policy making. And Olivia touched on this when she talked about future scenarios. How do we future-proof ourselves? This is a really good example of global collaboration. Our collaboration with the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis was called Transformations Within Reach: Pathways to a Sustainable and Resilient World. And again, a major undertaking that involved a consultative platform with hundreds of experts. And again, this might have normally taken place in a conference hall or a room where we gathered and had those discussions around the coffee table that we've suddenly lost through this pandemic. So I think the key to the success of this project was not trying to find solutions to all of our cascading crises. We concentrated on 4 themes that the international scientific and policy-making community could make a difference on. And they were governance for sustainability, strengthening science systems, resilient food systems, and sustainable energy. I think the other key to the success of this project was the convening power of our organisations to bring in respected world leaders, such as Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland and an ISC patron, and Ban Ki-moon, the former Secretary General to the United Nations. So, you know, we now have this active project that has engaged a unique set of transdisciplinary global thought leaders who are encouraging policymakers to use systemic thinking and approaches which will ensure their recovery investment, which we know is trillions of dollars, is leveraged for longer term sustainability and resilience for a more just and sustainable world. I feel that the key message here is that the international science community really stepped up in a moment of profound crisis, adapting to the constraints of the pandemic. And we found ways to collaborate and convene to accelerate the pathways to finding solutions, not just in developing vaccines, but finding solutions to knowledge brokerage, how we share knowledge with policymakers to ensure the decisions that affect ordinary citizens are evidence-based. You know, I really want us to take this moment of science and I want to see it flourish through more international collaboration that develops pathways to a sustainable future. Gabriela, I'm conscious of the time, so I'll leave it there for your questions.
You mentioned your wonderful initiative, Global Science Portal, and I would love if you can please share with us your key takeaways that we can, let's say, take as we create pathways to a post-pandemic world.
I mean, I mentioned that one of the key takeaways to the success for this COVID-19 Global Science Portal was just the immense amount of engagement that we had with our scientific unions, our disciplinary unions, our academies, our members. But, you know, it did begin to slow. You know, we had this flurry of activity. And what we learned as a council is that, you know, we had these extra projects that we took on as part of, you know, on top of our existing projects. And along with this strange new normal of working from home, it meant our capacity to surge and thrive was diminishing. I mean, I'm sure most people, you know, if you recall last year, you know, we had this surge capacity and we were doing much more than we could ever imagine. And at some point, your capacity to surge diminishes. So we had to take stock and think, what can we really deliver for the international science community that has impact? So for 2021, our key word is compassion. Compassion in how we work, compassion in how we deliver projects for impact, and ensuring we choose the right projects with scarce resources. So for the moment, what we've done with the Global Science Portal is that we've archived it. And in fact, we're looking at some of our existing projects. We're reimagining Global Science TV. And we've had a look at the knowledge gaps that exist in international science for COVID-19. And a gap that was identified was looking at COVID-19 scenarios. So I spoke earlier about the need for more international collaboration and less nationalism, and this project is a really good example. So COVID-19, like climate change and biodiversity loss, knows no borders. And right now we have 2 choices. We have a divided world scenario whereby some countries get ahead in vaccine rollout, leaving others behind, mostly from the global south. Or we might have to deal with the challenges of further mutations, or we're dealing with vaccine hesitancy and misinformation. This is division and nationalism. This isn't collaboration. What we want to achieve is we want to aim for a one world scenario where rich countries and poor countries alike have equal access to vaccines, equal access to long-term recovery, and we're prepared for further mutations, and we have dedicated programs that counter misinformation so we can bring an end game to the pandemic. So through this project, we have brought together the WHO, the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Office, and a global oversight committee to develop future scenarios for the pandemic endgame, much like the scenario planning for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And I think it was Olivia who mentioned scenarios and bringing in film writers. And I mean, this is the type of thing that we need to be smart about in our collaboration. We need to collaborate with all science, but we also sometimes need to collaborate and think outside the box of people who have skills in looking at future scenarios. So I want to give you a reality check, but I want to give you a heavy dose of hope. The COVID-19 road ahead is long and winding and uncertain, and what emerges next is going to depend on the evolution of the virus, on the behaviours of citizens, on the decisions of governments, on the progress in medical science, and the extent to which the international community can stand together in its efforts to defeat the virus. So to sum up on the key takeaways, the way the ideas and debates came through the Global Science Portal gave rise to this new collaborative effort behind the COVID-19 Scenarios Project. We were in the zone of collaborating in this new way of doing it through Zoom, through the technology that we have. And we're taking this moment for science in finding solutions to the immediacy of the global pandemic. And we will harness this new consciousness in society and acting together to make changes in our individual lives that affect the greater good. So that point to science is the global public good. And we take these learnings and apply them during this time of COVID, and we will take them and apply them to the really big challenges of our time, and find solutions to the climate crisis and the biodiversity loss. And through scientific collaboration, bringing the natural and social sciences and humanities together, we can find solutions.
Following up on your idea and initiative, the One World scenario, and the key term that we used in today's panel, collaboration. How do you see the cross-sector collaborations playing a role in the post-pandemic world where science fields, but many other fields collaborate with each other and share resources?
Yeah, we keep talking about this post-pandemic world, and I wonder if we ever will be post-pandemic, because the next pandemic could be around the corner, or the coronavirus could become endemic like the flu. But you know, our ongoing activities at the International Science Council have continued, but they've continued in what I would call having a COVID-19 flavour. That is, you know, we have an urgency to build and catalyse partnerships to find solutions, and we must work across sectors and build partnerships and share resources. So, I mean, on the point about sharing resources, knowledge is a really key resource. And we've just published Opening the Record of Science, Making Scholarly Publishing Work for Science in the Digital Era. And this highlights 7 principles for scientific publishing. And the first being that there should be universal open access to the record of science. We must have access to knowledge. It's a key resource. During the first and second waves of the pandemic, one of our key partners was the United Nations Development Programme, and we were tasked with rethinking human development. The Human Development Report is 30 years old. And again, we mobilised expertise across the sectors, including natural and social science. And through this project, we developed 9 key directions for human development. And many of the essays and discussions that we had through this project, again, had a COVID-19 flavour, had a sense of urgency. And I think what really came out when we were thinking about rethinking human development was that this notion that development as freedom is impossible without considering our planetary boundaries. So I think you've got some similar messaging coming out that's developing, whether it be human development or addressing climate change or achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, or ensuring we have a one world scenario for the global pandemic, it all points to global collaboration, interdisciplinarity and partnerships. I mean, again, one of the major undertakings we've had is to look at cascading risks and hazards. We know with climate change that we're going to have more extreme weather events, and again, it highlights the importance of international partnerships. Our scientific unions, who are members of the ISC, worked with the Office of United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction and Public Health England to create hundreds of hazard profiles. And again, this is crucial knowledge sharing for the disaster risk reduction and resilience community that will enable the community to build resilience for future risk, for future-proofing ourselves. We also need to bring in the funding bodies into future collaboration. So the ISC has put a call out to funders of science to say, hey, you know, we require game-changing collective action within the funding and science systems globally in order to maximise the contribution of science towards the implementations of the SDGs. And we can't go down a business as usual path. We need to look at mission-based science to succeed. And actually we'll be convening the Global Forum of Funders in a few weeks to practically look how we can catalyse our efforts. So to finish, I also think we need to, you know, we speak about collaboration, but I also think we need to look within ourselves and look at our own science systems. How are the existing structures, barriers to participation? You know, how do we ensure that women have a voice? How do we ensure that the structures around the science systems that have been created combat racism and other forms of discrimination? You know, we're convening global partners, including through projects such as the Gender Gap in Science, and we're challenging our members to agree on concrete steps aimed at correcting systemic discrimination in science. So I think collaboration also involves some inward looking. And again, finding innovative ways to engage the public. So for example, we've just done a podcast series with Nature on diversity in science. And this has brought up some really interesting discussions within our own organisations of how can we do better, how can we ensure that we are a global voice for science. So we must ensure that we convene all science and hear from many voices if we are to find solutions to today's global challenges. I'll leave it there, Gabriela. Thank you.
And glad to be contributing our voices to the, what you call the new consciousness of the society. I love so much this expression, and thank you for sharing with us your wonderful initiatives and perspectives on science and collaboration across many fields. Before introducing our final speaker, I would like to invite our audience joining us on YouTube to leave their questions because we will follow up with the Q&A session at the end with all of our panelists just shortly. Now I am delighted to introduce Ms. Judith Bodenstein, which is she is the program manager for Berlin Science Week. Ms. Bodenstein is originally from Berlin and joined the Falling Walls Foundation in May 2020 as program project manager for Berlin Science Week. In the midst of the transformation to a digital concept, it became her task to co-develop the digital platform and support the participating organizations in the implementation of the digital formats. As a studied cultural manager from the realm of theater, she comes to the scientific community as a cross-entry and is committed to an interdisciplinary and open exchange of ideas and knowledge. Welcome, Ms. Judith Bodenstein, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gabriela, and thank you for inviting me, especially as a newbie to the scene. So I'm happy to talk about the experiences of Berlin Science Week in 2020. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Berlin Science Week, we are a 10-day science festival. Every year between the 1st and 10th of November, scientific organizations are invited to present their research and work by organizing events. Through their diverse contributions, our program broadly reflects the current topics of science and society, which enables a discussion between science community and the interested public. It is also our aim to foster formats that are future thinking and science communication, to find new interactive and also fun ways to make science accessible for curious minds from around the world. So we see it as our mission to make sure that different voices in science are heard, to strengthen an interdisciplinary and diverse scientific network, and to enable the dialogue between science and society. Now, in 2020, in light of the global pandemic, we had heated discussions how an international science event like ours could take place at all. Understanding that November might be a starting point for a second wave, we ventured a completely new approach for Berlin Science Week together and under the umbrella of the Falling Walls Foundation. The motto became, "Never waste a crisis." We shifted to a digital concept and explored how we could offer a platform that is flexible for the different needs of our community. While new virtual conferencing platforms were emerging, we couldn't find anything that was able to fulfill all our very particular needs. As a crazy consequence, we started to build our own digital platform and managed together with our participating organizations from Berlin and abroad to shift to a fully digital program. So besides all challenges, we were very happy that more than 1,000 high-class speakers and contributors were involved in over 200 digital formats such as expert panels, workshops, lectures, performances, exhibitions, and many more. Topics included the future of work, energy of food, insights into AI, robotic and quantum, climate change, advances in health and medicine, diversity and identity in science were addressed, as well as open access, or of course, the effects of COVID-19. So altogether, we had over 65,000 event visits from 138 countries, which was really a big success for everyone who was involved. And it was inspiring to witness truly global discussions where people could participate that usually would not be able to come to Berlin. I will be honest, it wasn't always easy as we had to rethink our approach to Berlin Science Week and develop new concepts for participation, as well as create our own digital platform in just a few months. But it was really great to see how many partners and contributors did their very best to adjust to the new conditions and inspired with new creative ideas for formats and topics. And we are especially grateful for the trust and flexibility of our funding partners. So 2021 is actually not really making it easier for us. I mean, our hopes are high that we will once again be able to meet in person. I guess that's something that we're all longing for. However, the added value that digitalization can offer us is something that we plan to keep. That's why we continue to improve our digital platform, making it easier to host hybrid or digital events, as well as look for crossover effects where digitalization can help us in creating a new experience, especially more and lasting accessibility. That's easier said than done, but we're looking forward to another year of new adventures with hopefully less surprises, but with the same enthusiasm and dedication from our partners who helped make last year's Berlin Science Week the success that it was. So in all we do, our main goal is to support the science community as best as we can by providing a platform that enables global and interdisciplinary discussions about the current challenges in science and society. So yeah, I hope this brief introduction gave you an idea of our work and the challenges we had to face last year. And I'm happy to answer your questions, Gabriela.
Thank you. And as we look forward to the 2021 edition of Berlin Science Week, I have to mention great memories from last year where you supported us in organizing a session, Meet the Heroes, Inclusivity and Diversity in Science. And talking about the 2020 edition, what are your highlights from the event last year? Let's say challenges and opportunities you saw during the event that for the first time was held during a pandemic.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, the first challenge, the big one that we all had to face was the new and completely unknown situation, right? That came with so many uncertainties. So like you said in the beginning, Gabriela, I actually come from theater and opera. So I'm used to organize events that are 2 to 5 years in advance, to not know what happens in the next week or even tomorrow is a huge challenge until today, I must say. So now back in 2020, when we decided that the risk is too high to have physical events, we said, okay, let's use this disruption as an opportunity. Let's embrace the unknown. But then digitalization became our biggest challenge. And here again, it was a challenge for most of us, I would say. I remember last year it was still, new to me to set up a Zoom meeting. Our first annual network meeting last year, we still had to write a manual, how to use Zoom, how do you turn on your camera, how to use chat functions, all these things. So together with our colleagues and participating organizations, we had to figure out the basics of digital events. I still had to Google, how do you set up a live stream on YouTube? Which software do you use? Which technical equipment? How to avoid technical problems, which was, of course, a big fear for everyone. So there were so many questions, and the level of knowledge was really basic in the beginning. So that can be quite horrifying, especially when you're used to plan things ahead and you try to think it through, right? So, but here again, all in all, it was good because we were sitting in the same boat with everyone. It was new to everyone. So we are very happy for all the participating organizations like you, Gabriela, who just decided with us to jump in at the deep end and made it happen despite all challenges. So it wasn't an easy ride. It wasn't easy to turn into a completely digital festival with so many different organizations involved. The organizers had to figure out how to set up a digital event that has completely different needs in terms of concept, in terms of equipment, expertise, access. And we, at the same time, had the challenge to build a digital platform that where all the different events could be accessed from. So we were simultaneously developing and implementing the platform, which caused bug after bug while we already had published. That was truly a nightmare. It was like playing whack-a-mole, where you just like constantly alert and try to fix everything as fast as possible. But I must say it was worth the effort at the end, because we had events that were running smoothly. People from all over the world joined the discussions, and fortunately only a handful of events actually needed to be cancelled, because on the 2nd of November it turned out that right in the beginning of the festival, the lockdown started again in Germany, which ruled that no event gatherings were any longer allowed. So it was definitely the right choice to go digital and to make it happen and to face these challenges, because we believe that especially in these times, it is so important that we come together and that we have open discussions about the challenges that we're facing.
And following up on your point of future science events, maybe not only mentioning science, but across fields and theater and opera, taking into consideration your background. What is your perspective on the future of science events, maybe in the virtual hybrid format, across disciplines, art and science together? How do you see the future?
Well, that's such a difficult question, because there are lots of different ideas and concepts being discussed at this moment, right? We will have a post tomorrow on social media that quotes Lauren Kane from Maurice, who wrote in a blog post, "As we reflect on the lessons of 2020, what's most clear is that the future is unclear." So that is a good summary for me. I mean, 2020 offered rare opportunity to reshape the traditional conference format, to create better, more inclusive ways to bring the science community together. But I think in the long run, not all science events or events in general will go back to how it used to be. We will probably see a lot of different approaches depending on the objectives of the event and which audiences are being addressed. Probably a lot of conference organizers will switch to hybrid events or offer virtual and physical meetings or formats to make use of the best of both worlds, right? Like Alison said before, it's so nice to come to physical space and just have these unexpected encounters. But of course, the benefits on the other side are that you have greater global accessibility, that it's easier to join a panel like ours right now. You know, we don't have to travel for one event to the whole conference. And of course, sustainability will play a role in this consideration. So at Berlin Science Week, we will try to stay as inclusive and dynamic as possible. As a platform that gathers scientific events in all its varieties, we have to stay compatible with the needs of our participating organizations. But we also have to consider this perspective of the online user as well as the audience in Berlin. To make sure that everyone has an exciting and smooth festival experience is the next challenge we're facing. So dealing with these ideas and concepts while we have a still ongoing pandemic with all its uncertainties is definitely not making it easier for us or for anyone organizing events at this point. But I'm sure we will see new creative ideas how to deal with it, and we will keep on learning with every step that we take, and we will try to make the best out of it.
Absolutely. And after an insightful panel discussion touching on multiple key points regarding the science and social innovation fields, we moved to the Q&A, taking questions from the audience, joining us from all over the world. And Judith, because you mentioned creativity, we have an interesting question from one of our audience members, asking, how do you stimulate creativity? It seems to me to be rather hard to do so, even more so in the present context, being confined inside the house.
That's a really good question. And if you recall, I spoke about our ability to have surge capacity, and that you reach a point where your body no longer, if you physically can no longer surge. And I don't know about anyone else in this panel, but as time moves forward, I find it hard to be creative. I find that I've got enough space to do my job, to feed my cat, to go for a walk, and my world has shrunk. You know, some of us had a global playground, and now it's shrunk a lot smaller. So I think again the key is finding ways to celebrate being human. And we used to celebrate being human by gathering, by hugging, by touching, by going to concerts, and doing all of those cultural things that somehow don't feel the same online. So I think, we speak about innovation in science. Who knows what the next global science conference might look like? It might look like a hybrid model where some of us are wearing virtual reality, some of us are there as holograms, some of us are in the room. We will get through this, and we will find, crises promotes creativity, and it was creativity that was in the labs creating the vaccines. It's creativity that's going to be in the fields doing transdisciplinary science, doing social science to find new ways. So my message would be, hang in there. We'll be going like this. Sometimes you're feeling down, sometimes you're feeling up, but we will get there. Science will give you hope.
Thank you for such a powerful message, especially since you shared with us today that it's the World Health Day. So thank you so much for this message. And as we are taking questions from the audience, I open the floor to all of our esteemed guests to share with us from their perspectives. And another question we have is, do you think that the pandemic helped us break more cultural barriers between countries and work together for the greater good? And can we hope that those relationships will grow even after the pandemic? I invite the panel.
I can address that. I mean, it's a challenging question, to be honest, because I think some of the other panelists spoke about it. You have this mix of countries and economies trying to figure out things themselves, knowing that this is a global issue, knowing that we need to look globally for solutions. And so I'm not so sure about cultural barriers, but in terms of noting that we need to collaborate, we need to share information, we need to share data, and we need to think holistically about the problem. I think that is absolutely the case. And I think it's a great lesson that we will take with us moving forward, again, not only as this pandemic challenge continues and as we continue to see the effects of it, but for what is coming next, whether that is the next pandemic or a natural disaster or something else like that. I think that there are excellent lessons that we've learned about transparency and about openness and about reciprocity that we can bring into our collaborations across all sorts of science and engagements.
Yes, I would like actually also to address this question if possible. I think we have seen some great examples of cooperation and international cooperation in the context of the pandemic. Some of the vaccines that we have are a product of such cooperation. We also have seen tremendous cooperation at the level of the scientific community. Of course, scientists are well integrated in the global community. But just to give you an example, at some point, some engineers in my hometown in Western Romania were using a patent developed by Polish researchers and made available on open access platform for ventilators. Basically, people using information knowledge made available in other countries to try to enhance the capacity and to produce ventilators at that stage of the pandemic last spring when there was a huge shortage. And we have also seen medical staff, now that we are actually celebrating today the International Health Day, and paying respect, of course, to the medical staff, but we have seen medical staff traveling to other countries just to support the medical staff that was on the front line. So there have been signs that we actually can cooperate, and when pressed and when the challenge is quite large, people, I think, have come together during this pandemic and have joined forces at the international level to address the challenge.
Thank you so much. And another wonderful question we have for Dr. Olivier Todaran. How do we make sure we are prepared for a hypothetical next crisis, like another pandemic or some other calamity?
Wow, a difficult one. We can't make it sure. That's the honest answer. So really make it sure, 100% certitude. It's not something within the reach, I would say. It would be a foolish, ambition, although legitimate. But what we can do, and I think all of us have suggested that one way or the other, is to really focus on these principles and ways of preparing for the future permanently, in a way that would increase the chances that we are better prepared for the next challenge or for the next crisis of global proportions, or at least of an important proportion, which is really collaboration and cooperation. And that has been the buzzword, one of the buzzwords across all our interventions tonight or today, depending on the time. Also, evidence-based, the role of science. This is really not to be underestimated, and it is a crucial lesson. I agree here with all the interventions in the panel. And this, during the first months of the pandemic, if you remember, as I think, I don't know, Alison or Staci had pointed out, you would have prime ministers with the chief science officer, with the chief, and it seemed to be kind of, unfortunately, but the positive fallout of this or consequence of this, that this is a golden age for science. But this is, as you can see, increasingly contested across the world. And it is quite paradoxical in a way that countries and societies, be they rich or poor, north or south, east or west, are converging, or segments of those societies are converging in contesting vaccination or the role of masks or the kind of wisdom of medical proof and so on. So collaborating, including internationally, putting science on the right place. Of course, we can argue, there can be always answers and counter answers, and that's why you verify and you counter verify, but still with science messages, with science methods, and with the mind openness, with no really prejudice and stereotypes. So that's then the third thing is really fighting the infodemic that has undermined this and has kind of put a shadow on the golden age of science that could have been. So collaboration, science, and working with science message, trying to keep people open to truth and even counter-truth, but to dialogue and to verification, I would say. This is also important. And working, well, it's classical already word of multi-stakeholder approach, but really meaning it. So taking the movie directors and taking the physicians, but the physicists and the microbiologists and the leaders and their staffers, so from high to bottom up and top down, training people to look into the future, try to anticipate it and be prepared for what they anticipate, but also be kind of minimal abilities or minimal surviving kits, let's say policy making kits, being also adaptable and prepared for what is not to be foreseen, but still have a basic resilience sets, including from stocks to mental abilities and decision-making procedures. So I would say these are the key factors to be sure not eat up on the time for the other questions that would increase the chances to be better prepared. But certitude, I'm afraid there are no longer only for our beliefs really and values, the things we are certain we hold dear in a way. But other type of certitudes, it's hard to be able to ascertain in a way, definitively. Thank you.
Thank you. And sorry for not being able to cover all of the questions that we have in the chat. As we move to the closing remarks of our event, mindful of the time as well, I invite our distinguished panelists to share with us their closing remarks. So Ms. Staci, Rijal, if you'd like.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you. This was a wonderful experience to be able to talk with you and all of the panelists about all of the various things that we have to consider when we're trying to promote women's leadership in science, when we're trying to address global challenges, and how do we move forward. I know you wanted us to end on kind of a single positive, like what is our message for the future? And I think what I would lead with is that we have a method in science to learn, to adapt, and to move forward. That's really the key part of science, is you keep looking back at what has happened. You look at additional data, you challenge assumptions, and you make changes into how you look at things to move things forward. And so if we look to the lessons that we've learned in science, and if we collaborate and communicate and really commit to transparency, I think we have ways to make sure that the next challenge that we face, we are better prepared, we are better able to adapt, and that we can better face the future. And I believe that women can and should and are a critical part of that. And it's up to each of us to make sure that that is part of our solution, is engaging women leaders, listening to women, allowing them to do the communication, promoting the science that they're doing, the research that they're doing, funding the research that they're doing. So we have solutions, and we also have work that we need to do. Thank you.
I would like to invite now Dr. Alexandra-Maria Boxer.
Yes, I mean, we definitely live through times of very fast change. And I think the word that was mentioned here, and a word that is key, is the need to adapt. And we need to prepare our societies to adapt to the changes that will come in the future. And science is important in this process of adaptation, and making sure that our societies can cope with future challenges that will stay with us. And also, given my field of interest, a challenge that we estimate is going to be very important, and we are going to have to face over the next years and the next decades. It's the climate change challenge. And of course, we rely on science understanding science and also applying science into our policy decisions. This is actually key to responding to climate change. Thank you.
It would be my turn. Yeah. Well, I think the messages were already conveyed.
Dr. Olivier Todaran.
Yes, I think that the messages have already been conveyed in my interventions, but I would really like to thank Judith and Alison, Alexandra, Staci for a very interesting, and at least for me personally and in my profession, enriching debate, truly with no kind of free words or just PR in this. It has added to me, and I hope the audience would take home or in their mind some thoughts. It's just a wish at the end, and thanking also Gabriela for a very creative combination of speakers, which I found really, although we have all these online things, quite interesting and very appealing and inspiring tonight. And I would really just wish all the audience, and including the panelists, to not fear change, be mindful of change, to stay safe and be inspired. And that would be really my message.
Thank you so much. Miss Alison Meston, please.
Yeah, how can I add anything new or say anything more? You know, I think the key is we have to convince policymakers to ensure that they make evidence-based decisions, and we have to promote that as best we can. And in providing the policymakers that evidence, you know, we need to make sure that our science systems are fair and are responsive to all voices in science, and that could mean Indigenous voices, it could mean women, it could mean people with disabilities. We need to make sure that our science systems are in good shape, and our international science systems are in good shape to meet the very wicked and cascading challenges that are facing up in the next 10 to 50 years. But I have hope. I have great hope that science and scientists together with the community will head in the right direction. I think it's an exciting time to be a human as much as it is a difficult time right now.
Thank you. And Ms. Judith Bodenstein.
Well, I will just add to everyone, and especially to what Alison was just saying. I think it's important that we come together, and that we come together from the different disciplines, and that we take into consideration the different perspectives from the different people, that we listen to each other, that we learn from each other, that we collaborate cross-sectional, and that we inspire each other.
Thank you. And in closing, I would like to thank to our world-renowned panel of women leaders who today share with us their wonderful initiatives and perspective on 2021 and beyond. I would like to thank our audience who joined us live from all over the world. Thanks to our Berea de Firsic Challenge Romania team and my colleague Ana Popescu, and to the wonderful Falling Walls Engage team, Nicolas Martineg, Milena Salci, Moritz Harbig, Fabio Hanel, and Lewis Hu for your support that made this all possible. And in closing, I would like to share with you also the wonderful news that the 4th edition of Falling Walls Engage will return to Berlin as a physical event as part of the Falling Walls 2021 on November. And to prepare the reunion, Falling Walls just launched the call for applications for the 2021 Breakthrough of the Year in Science Engagement. And I invite science engagers around the world to apply and to connect with other inspiring science engagers involving communities in meaningful and impactful ways around the world. And I had the honor of being a finalist Science Engager of the Year, and I invite other science engagers to join the wonderful Falling Walls community. So please check the open call for 2021 Breakthroughs of the Year. And with this, I would like to thank again everyone, and please have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are.
Thank you.